The desert night swallowed sound. In the Iraqi wasteland 15 kilometers behind enemy lines, the silence was a living thing. It pressed against eardrums. It made men doubt their own heartbeats. In that silence, 6 Navy SEALs lay pinned in a shallow wadi, and their radios were as useful as stones. The year was 1991. Operation Desert Storm, the liberation that wasn't supposed to go wrong. Captain Nathaniel Blackwell pressed his face against sand that tasted of ancient seas and modern diesel. He was 35 years old. His hands were steady. His mind was a machine that calculated angles and probabilities, while other men prayed. Above him, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, indifferent to the small drama of men with guns. The solar flare had hit 6 hours ago. Command called it an act of God. Blackwell called it bad luck and worse planning. Every radio in the sector had died in a wash of static. Satellite navigation had dissolved into nonsense. The carefully coordinated operation had become 6 men alone in the dark with an enemy that knew exactly where they were. Lieutenant Bryce Vandermeer lay 3 meters to Blackwell's left. He was the officer in charge. West Point graduate, family money, political connections that reached all the way to the Pentagon. He was 25 years old and he was frozen solid with fear. "We need extraction." Vandermeer's voice was a whisper that still managed to shake. "We need to move. What we need," Blackwell said, his voice flat as hammered iron, "is for you to breathe and think." Vandermeer's eyes were white circles in a dirt-streaked face. "The radios are dead. GPS is dead. We're blind out here." "No." Blackwell reached into his vest and pulled out a small brass compass. It was older than both of them, older than the war. "We're not blind. We're just not looking." Petty Officer Garrison Cole was the youngest man in the squad. He was 35 but looked 20. This was his first real operation, his first time past the wire where the rules dissolved and survival became an equation with too many variables. He watched Captain Blackwell with the intensity of a man watching someone defuse a bomb, because that's what Blackwell was doing, diffusing the panic that could kill them faster than any enemy. Blackwell rose to a crouch. Around him, the wadi walls were low ridges of crumbling stone. Above the stars, he pulled a paper map from his pocket, not a digital display. Paper, creased and worn and marked with coordinates in pencil. "Here," his finger stabbed the map. "We're here." Vandermeer stared at the map like it was written in Sanskrit. "How can you possibly know that?" "Dead reckoning. We moved 3 clicks northeast from the drop point. I counted my paces, adjusted for terrain." Blackwell's finger traced a line. "Coalition artillery is staged here, 12 kilometers southwest. We can't call them. The radios..." "Don't need radios." Blackwell was already moving, pulling equipment from his pack. A signal mirror, a flashlight with red filter, and something else. A small metal device that looked like a relic from a museum. Cole leaned closer. "Captain, what is that?" "Heliograph. Used it in scout training. Morse code via reflected light." Blackwell positioned the mirror, angling it toward the distant southwest horizon. "Artillery units still maintain visual watch. They have to, for exactly this scenario." His hands began to work. Flash, pause, flash, flash, pause. The pattern was deliberate, precise, ancient. A message encoded in light sent across 12 kilometers of hostile desert to men who might not even be looking. Vandermeer watched with something approaching awe and something approaching contempt. That's archaic." "It works." Blackwell didn't look up. His attention was absolute. Flash, pause, flash. When tech dies, training doesn't. For 11 minutes, nothing happened. The SEALs waited in their shallow grave of sand and stone. Enemy patrols were out there in the dark, moving, searching. The Americans had been inserted to gather intelligence on a suspected chemical weapons facility. They'd found the facility. They'd confirmed the intel. And then the solar flare had cut them off from everyone who could help. Cole checked his rifle for the 40th time. His hands wanted something to do, something to control. "Captain, how do you know they'll see it?" "I don't." Blackwell kept flashing his signal. "But I know if we panic and run, we die. If we stay here at dawn, we die. So we try this, because trying beats dying." That was when Vandermeer said the thing that would echo through decades. "This is insane. We should move on foot. Try to reach friendly lines." Blackwell stopped signaling. He turned his head slowly. His eyes were the color of winter ice. "Lieutenant, with respect, shut up and let me work." In the rigid hierarchy of military command, that statement was close to mutiny. Vandermeer's face went red even in the darkness, but he said nothing. Because somewhere deep in his bones, in the part of him that was still honest, he knew Blackwell was right. The answer came at minute 17, a distant pop. Then another. Illumination rounds. White phosphorus burning in lazy arcs across the southern sky. Not random, pattern fire. Morse code sent back to them in light and thunder. Message received. Coordinates confirmed. Fire mission ready. Blackwell's face never changed expression. He simply nodded once and began adjusting his signal mirror. Now came the hard part. Spotting for artillery without radios meant pure geometry. Angle and distance, wind speed and earth rotation. Mathematics that men had been doing since cannons were invented. He calculated in his head while drawing in the sand. Numbers, vectors, corrections for atmospheric pressure. Then he began flashing coordinates. The enemy position was a ridge 500 meters north. Dug-in machine gun nest, mortars, at least 40 hostiles. They'd been probing the weighty for the last hour. Flash, flash, pause, flash, numbers encoded in light. The artillery battery 12 kilometers away received the message. Adjusted their guns, calculated ballistic arcs, and fired. The first round landed 40 meters long. The explosion lit the desert like a newborn sun. Blackwell adjusted. Flash corrections. The second round hit 30 meters short. The third round landed exactly on target. The Iraqi position ceased to exist in a thunderclap of high explosive and shrapnel. We move now. Blackwell was already on his feet. Artillery has a firing corridor. We follow it out. They moved. 6 shadows across broken ground. Vandermeer stumbled twice, his night vision inadequate, his training insufficient. Cole stayed close to Blackwell, learning by watching. The captain navigated by stars and compass, and the kind of spatial awareness that couldn't be taught, only earned through years of moving through hostile dark. They were 3 kilometers from friendly lines when the ambush happened. Iraqi scouts, 3 of them, appearing from behind a rubble pile like gin from smoke. The lead scout's AK-47 was already rising. Already aiming at Lieutenant Vandermeer's center mass. Blackwell moved, not fast. Fast implied hurry, implied panic. Blackwell moved with the inevitability of gravity. He crossed the space between himself and Vandermeer in 2 strides. His hand was already pushing the lieutenant down. His body was already turning, already interposing himself between Vandermeer and the rifle. The AK-47 fired. 3 rounds, full automatic. The range was 8 meters. 2 rounds missed. The third caught Blackwell in the left shoulder. The impact spun him halfway around. Blood misted the air, but he was still moving, still fighting. His sidearm was out and firing before his brain had time to register pain. The firefight lasted 11 seconds. When it ended, 3 Iraqi scouts were dead, and Captain Nathaniel Blackwell was bleeding into the sand. Cole was there instantly. Trauma kit out, hands steady despite the adrenaline screaming through his veins. Captain, hold still. I'm fine. Blackwell's voice was tight but controlled. Through and through, missed the bone. He looked at Vandermeer, who was staring at him with shock-white eyes. You okay, Lieutenant? Vandermeer couldn't speak. He just nodded. Blackwell grimaced as Cole packed the wound. Good, then let's keep moving. They made it back to friendly lines 40 minutes later. Blackwell walked the entire way, refused a stretcher, refused morphine, refused anything that would dull his awareness, because the mission wasn't over until they were inside the wire. At the field hospital, as medics cut away his uniform, Blackwell called Cole over. The young petty officer approached with the reverence of a man approaching an altar. Chief, Blackwell's voice was getting thready. Blood loss, shock waiting in the wings. Listen to me. Yes, sir. Blackwell pulled something from his pocket, the brass compass. Old and worn and marked with scratches from 100 operations. Take this. Cole's eyes went wide. Sir, I can't. You can. Blackwell pressed it into Cole's hand. Today you learned something most operators never learn. When the tech dies, your brain is all you've got. Training, discipline, the fundamentals. His grip tightened. Don't ever forget that. Cole's throat was too tight to speak. He just nodded. Blackwell smiled. It was a small expression on a hard face. Technology fails, son. Training doesn't. Remember that when you're teaching the next generation. Then the morphine hit, and Captain Nathaniel Blackwell's eyes rolled back, and the medics took over. Cole stood there holding the compass. It was warm from Blackwell's body heat. The brass caught the harsh fluorescent lights of the field hospital. On the back was an engraving. Simple words worn smooth by years of handling. Discipline is the only weapon no one can take from you. Sure. 27 years passed. The world turned. The wars changed names, but not nature. Captain Nathaniel Blackwell became Major Blackwell, became Colonel Blackwell. He trained operators. He ran missions. He became a legend whispered about in classified briefings. The man who navigated by stars. The man who called artillery with a mirror. The man who made young operators memorize trigonometry tables because someday the batteries would die. Garrison Cole retired at 62. 20 years in the teams. A chest full of medals he never wore. A mind full of memories he rarely shared. He kept the compass, carried it everywhere, a reminder, a promise. In 2018, the promise came due. Afghanistan, Forward Operating Base Kandahar. Colonel Nathaniel Blackwell was 62 years old, too old for combat operations, but not too old to serve as a civilian advisor. His job was simple: teach young officers the old ways. Make sure the ancient skills didn't die when the last of the old breed retired. The base commander was a major who believed in technology above all else. Satellite surveillance, drone coverage, algorithmic threat assessment. When Blackwell suggested upgrading the analog backup systems, the major laughed. "We're not in the Stone Age anymore, Colonel. We have triple redundant digital systems." And when those systems fail, Blackwell's voice was patient. He'd had this argument before. They won't fail. That's what redundancy means. 3 days later, Taliban fighters infiltrated the perimeter using a blind spot Blackwell had identified. A blind spot the major had dismissed as statistically irrelevant. The attack was swift and brutal. Blackwell was in the Tactical Operations Center when the first explosion hit. He died covering the evacuation of 3 young lieutenants. Took 14 rounds while laying down suppressive fire. Bought them 30 seconds. It was enough. The major survived. Blackwell didn't. At the funeral, Garrison Cole stood in the back row. He was 62 years old. His hair was iron gray. His body still hard from discipline that refused to fade. He watched them fold the flag, watched them present it to Blackwell's daughter. She was 27, naval officer, recently graduated from some pipeline Cole didn't know the details of. She had her father's eyes, ice blue and uncompromising. When she took the flag, her hands didn't shake. Cole wanted to approach her, wanted to tell her about Iraq, about the compass, about the debt he'd carried for nearly 3 decades. But he didn't. This wasn't the time. Maybe there would never be a time. He placed the compass on Blackwell's casket, left it there, walked away. 6 years later, the compass came back to him. But that's getting ahead of the story. The year was 2024. Summer heat made mirages dance on the tarmac of Forward Operating Base Redstone. The base was 800 acres of sand concrete and determination carved into hostile territory. Its walls were high, its wire was razor sharp, its purpose was classified. Inside those walls, men and women moved with the efficient exhaustion of people who'd been deployed too long. Coffee was the base's primary fuel source. Sleep was a rumor. The war had no name here. Just coordinates and objectives and casualties counted in spreadsheets sent to people who'd never heard a shot fired in anger. In a forgotten corner of the base, in a room that smelled of dust and old electronics, Master Chief Garrison Cole cleaned equipment that the modern military had declared obsolete. He was 68 years old, officially retired, unofficially recalled. His contract said civilian technical advisor, but what that meant in practice was the old man who knows how things worked before computers. They'd given him 6 months to catalog the deprecated communication systems before they were scrapped for parts. Cole worked slowly. His hands remembered circuits that young technicians had never seen. Field telephones from the 1980s, PRC-77 radios from Vietnam, analog signal generators that predated integrated circuits. To the modern military, this was junk. To Cole, it was history. More than that, it was capability that might save lives when the fancy toys failed. The room was quiet except for the whir of a ventilation fan that needed oil. On the wall, Cole had hung a photograph. 1991, SEAL Team 3 in Iraq. 6 men in desert camouflage. Young faces marked by dirt and determination. In the center, Captain Nathaniel Blackwell, 35 years old, alive. Cole stared at that photograph for a long time. Then he went back to work. The door opened without warning. Cole's hand dropped to where his sidearm used to be before he remembered he was a civilian now. Old habits. The woman who entered wore plain gray fatigues with no rank insignia, no patches, no name tape. She carried a battered aluminum case in one hand and a tablet in the other. Her hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. Her face was unremarkable except for her eyes. Ice blue, uncompromising, familiar. "Help you," Cole's voice was professionally neutral. "Master Chief Cole," she pronounced his rank correctly. Most civilians didn't. Just Cole now, retired. Right. She set her case down and looked around the room with an expression Cole recognized. Assessment, catalog, threat evaluation. This was someone with training. I'm with the DOD assessment team, logistics and readiness. I need to inspect the deprecated systems. Cole gestured at the racks of equipment. All yours. Though I should warn you, most of this is scheduled for decommission. Budget cuts. I know. She approached the equipment with careful steps. Her fingers traced the edge of a PRC-77 radio. The touch was gentle, almost reverent. This radio saved my father's life. Gulf War 91. Cole froze. His heart, which had been beating at a steady resting rate for 68 years, stumbled. Your father, Captain Nathaniel Blackwell, SEAL Team 3. She turned to face him. Those eyes. God, those eyes were exactly like her father's. You might have heard of him. The room tilted slightly. Cole gripped the workbench to steady himself. 27 years of debt, 6 years of grief. And now here she was, the daughter. Nathaniel's legacy, walking and breathing and staring at him with a gaze that could cut steel. He should tell her, should explain, should pull out the compass that had mysteriously appeared in his mailbox 2 years after Blackwell's death. Should say I was there. Your father saved my life. I've been trying to repay that debt ever since. Instead, he said, I knew of him, legendary operator. If she suspected he was holding back, she didn't show it. He taught me that technology is a tool, not a crutch. These systems, she gestured at the analog equipment, they're not obsolete. They're fundamental. Try telling that to the brass. Cole found his voice settling back to normal. Major Vandermeer wants everything digital. Says analog is a waste of space. Something flickered in her eyes at the name Vandermeer. Recognition. Contempt. It was gone too fast to read. Major Vandermeer is the base commander. Tactical operations, yeah. Cole watched her carefully. You know him? I know of him. The same phrase she'd used about her father, but the tone was opposite. Dismissive. Cold. I'm sure we'll meet. She spent the next hour inspecting equipment with a thoroughness that impressed Cole despite himself. She wasn't just looking. She was testing. Checking connections, verifying functionality. This was someone who understood not just what the equipment did, but why it mattered. Finally, she straightened. This is good work, Chief, keeping these systems functional. Just doing the job. No, she met his eyes directly. You're preserving capability. There's a difference. She picked up her case. I'll be here for 2 weeks, conducting the full assessment. I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot of each other. Looking forward to it, ma'am. She paused at the door. My name is Eliza, by the way. Eliza Blackwell. Then she was gone. The door closed. Cole stood alone in his room of forgotten technology. His hands were shaking. He looked down at them, surprised. 68 years old, and he was shaking like a recruit before his first jump. He pulled open a desk drawer. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was the compass. Blackwell's compass. The one he'd placed on the casket. The one that had come back to him 2 years later with a note in handwriting he didn't recognize. He wanted you to have this. Use it to find her when the time comes. Cole unwrapped the compass. It was warm in his hand. The brass caught the fluorescent light. The engraving was still clear despite decades of wear. Discipline is the only weapon no one can take from you. The time had come. Nathaniel's daughter was here, in his space, and she was hunting something. Cole didn't know what, but he knew with absolute certainty that Major Bryce Vandermeer, yes, the same Lieutenant Vandermeer from Iraq, was about to have a very bad day. Cole smiled. It wasn't a kind expression. Major Bryce Vandermeer's office was a shrine to the modern military. 3 large monitors displayed real-time satellite feeds. A digital map covered one wall, flickering with blue friendly icons and red hostile markers. His desk held 2 tablets, a laptop, and a keyboard that glowed with RGB lighting. He was 42 years old. His uniform was perfectly pressed. His chest carried ribbons earned through staff positions and PowerPoint presentations. He'd spent 20 years in the Marines without firing a shot outside of a range. He was very good at his job, which was administration and image management. He was reviewing logistics reports when his aide knocked. Sir, the DOD assessment team is here. Assessment? Vandermeer didn't look up from his screen. Nobody told me about an assessment. Came through CENTCOM, sir. Logistics and readiness evaluation. 2-week duration. Vandermeer sighed. More bureaucratic nonsense. More civilians who'd never worn the uniform telling him how to do his job. Fine, send them to the conference room. I'll meet them at 1400. Sir, she's here now, says it's courtesy notification, not a meeting request. She. Vandermeer felt a familiar irritation. The military had changed since his academy days. Women in combat roles, lowered standards, political correctness, overriding operational necessity. He kept these opinions to himself in official settings, but they colored everything he did. Show her in. Eliza Blackwell entered with the quiet confidence of someone who'd walked into 1,000 hostile spaces. She wore the same gray fatigues, carried the same battered case. Her expression was professionally neutral. Vandermeer stood, didn't extend his hand. Major Vandermeer, I'm the Tactical Operations Commander for FOB Redstone. Eliza Blackwell, DoD Assessment Team. Right. He sat back down. A power move. Make her stand while he sat. Establish hierarchy. Nobody informed me of this assessment. CENTCOM priority. Notification was sent 72 hours ago. Her voice was flat, unemotional. I'm here to evaluate readiness for technology-denied operational scenarios. Vandermeer laughed, actually laughed. Technology-denied, Ms. Blackwell. We have triple redundant communication systems, satellite uplinks, encrypted mesh networks, drone coverage with AI-assisted pattern recognition. We're about as unjammable as it gets. Every system has a weakness. Not ours. He turned his monitor to show her. This is real-time threat assessment. Algorithmic processing of, I can read a screen, Major. Her tone didn't change. Still flat, still emotionless. But somehow the words carried an edge that made Vandermeer's jaw tighten. My job is to assess what happens when those screens go dark. They won't go dark. They always go dark, eventually. Vandermeer stood again. He was a large man, 6'2", 230 pounds. He'd played football at the academy. He used his size the way some men used weapons. Intimidation through presence. Ms. Blackwell, I appreciate CENTCOM's concern, but I've been running combat operations for 12 years. I think I know a bit more about readiness than he almost said, woman caught himself, than a civilian consultant. Eliza's expression didn't change. I'm sure you do, Major. The way she said it, the absolute lack of deference, the subtle implication that she was humoring him. It made something hot and ugly rise in Vandermeer's chest. I'll have my staff provide you with whatever access you need, but stay out of tactical spaces during operations. And stay out of the way. He turned back to his monitors. Dismissal. That'll be all. Thank you for your time, Major. She left. The door closed with a soft click. Vandermeer stared at his screens without seeing them. Something about that woman made his teeth ache, the way she looked at him. Like she was measuring him and finding him wanting an denas. Like she knew something he didn't. He shook it off. Civilian consultant, probably some policy wonk who'd never seen real combat. Let her write her little report. He'd continue doing his job, his very important job. Night fell on FOB Redstone like a curtain dropping on a stage. The temperature plummeted 40 degrees in 2 hours. Men wrapped themselves in field jackets and counted the days until rotation home. The mess hall was mostly empty. The late shift hadn't started. The day shift had already eaten. In the corner at a table by herself, Eliza Blackwell sat with a cup of black coffee. She wasn't drinking it, just holding it, letting the warmth seep into her palms while her mind worked through calculations and observations. 2 days on base, 14 facilities inspected, 18 interviews conducted, and one conclusion forming with crystalline clarity. Major Bryce Vandermeer was a liability, not malicious, not incompetent in the traditional sense, but arrogant, overconfident, dependent on technology he didn't truly understand. The kind of officer who'd never had his systems fail catastrophically, who'd never learned the difference between having tools and having skills. She'd seen his type before, in training, in briefings, men who mistook the map for the territory, who thought that having access to information was the same as having wisdom. Her father had died because of men like Vandermeer. The door to the mess hall banged open, loud, performative. Vandermeer entered with 2 other officers. His voice carried across the space. Discipline is a disgrace. I want names. I want accountability. This isn't summer camp. The junior officers nodded and made notes and kept their opinions to themselves. Vandermeer scanned the room. His eyes landed on Eliza. Something in his posture changed, hardened. He said something to his officers and walked toward her table. Eliza didn't look up. She watched her coffee, watched the steam rise in lazy spirals. Peripheral vision tracked Vandermeer's approach, cataloged his body language, aggressive, entitled. threatened by her presence in ways he probably didn't understand himself. He stopped at her table, planted his hands on his hips, the classic posture of dominance. Ms. Blackwell, she let 3 seconds pass, then she raised her head. Her eyes met his, calm, flat, utterly devoid of fear or deference. Major, you've been asking a lot of questions, making a lot of assessments. He leaned forward slightly, using his height, his mass. Some of my staff are wondering what exactly you're looking for. Vulnerabilities. We don't have vulnerabilities. Every system has vulnerabilities, Major. It's just a question of whether you've found them before the enemy does. Vandermeer's jaw tightened. You know what I think? I think CENTCOM is wasting resources on paranoid scenarios. We're in a combat zone, not a training exercise. Real operations. Real consequences. I understand that. Do you? He leaned closer. Have you ever been in combat, Ms. Blackwell? Have you ever had to make split-second decisions while people are shooting at you? Eliza's expression didn't change. Not a single muscle moved. But something in her eyes, something cold and ancient and utterly certain, made Vandermeer take an involuntary half-step back. I've been places, Major, done things, seen what happens when leaders prioritize ego over competence. Her voice was quiet, conversational. So yes, I understand consequences. Vandermeer felt heat rising in his chest, the disrespect, the implication. He reached out and shoved her table. Not hard, not violent, but aggressive, contemptuous. Coffee sloshed over the rim of her cup. Dark liquid spread across the gray metal surface. Pay attention when a field-grade officer is speaking to you. Every person in the mess hall stopped moving. Marines at other tables turned to watch. Tension pulled the air tight as a drumhead. This was a confrontation that could end careers. Eliza looked down at the spilled coffee. Then she looked back up at Vandermeer. Her expression had not changed, not by a micron. It was the most profound display of contempt Vandermeer had ever experienced. She had not said a word, but she had won the exchange. She reached for a napkin, wiped up the spilled coffee with slow, deliberate movements, folded the soiled napkin neatly, stood, picked up her cup, walked to the disposal unit, never looked at Vandermeer again. The Major stood there, fists clenched, face red. He'd expected anger, fear, deference. He'd received nothing. She'd absorbed his aggression, like sand absorbing water, made it disappear without trace. He spun and walked out. The door banged behind him. The mess hall remained silent for a long moment. In the corner, unnoticed, Master Chief Garrison Cole sat with his own coffee. He'd watched the entire exchange. His hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. 33 years ago, Lieutenant Vandermeer had frozen under fire, had nearly died, had been saved by a man who'd taken shrapnel in his place. And now Major Vandermeer was pushing around that man's daughter. Cole stood, followed Vandermeer out into the night. He caught up with the Major in the corridor outside the mess hall. Major, a word. Vandermeer turned, saw Cole, dismissed him. Not now, Chief. I'm busy. That was out of line. Cole's voice was quiet, dangerous. That woman you just disrespected is a civilian who doesn't belong in a tactical space. Vandermeer's voice was hard. I don't take feedback from contractors, Chief. I'm not giving you feedback. I'm giving you a warning. Excuse me? Cole stepped closer. He was shorter than Vandermeer, older, but something in his bearing, something earned through decades of walking into darkness with a rifle made the Major take a step back. That woman is not what she seems, and when you figure that out, it'll be too late. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Cole turned to walk away, paused. You've been lucky, Major, lucky that your incompetence hasn't killed anyone yet. But luck runs out, and when it does, you better hope someone like her is around to save your ass. He walked away, leaving Vandermeer staring after him with confusion and anger warring on his face. Midnight. The base was quiet except for the eternal hum of generators and the crackle of radio traffic. On the northern perimeter wall, Eliza Blackwell stood alone, staring out at the hostile dark. She heard footsteps behind her, didn't turn. Her right hand had already identified the sound. Single person, male, older, military bearing, either friend or someone who was about to learn a very painful lesson. Ma'am, Cole's voice. Mind if I join you? Free Country Chief. He stepped up beside her. For a minute, they just stood together watching the desert night. Stars overhead, sand below. The ancient emptiness that had swallowed empires. I'm sorry about Vandermeer. Cole's voice was rough. That was disrespectful. I've dealt with worse. I'm sure you have. Pause. He's always been like that, even when he was young. Eliza turned her head slightly, You know him? Knew him. Long time ago. Cole pulled something from his pocket, the compass. Brass catching starlight. Your father and I served together, Iraq, 91. Eliza went very still. Cole continued. Solar flare knocked out all our communications. We were behind enemy lines. Your father used this, he held up the compass and a signal mirror, in pure mathematics to call in artillery support. Saved all our lives. His voice thickened. Then he took shrapnel meant for Vandermeer. Pushed him out of the way. Took 3 rounds. Eliza's jaw was tight. He never mentioned it. He wouldn't. Not his style. Cole turned the compass over, showed her the engraving. He gave this to me in the field hospital. Told me to remember that when tech fails, training doesn't. Why are you telling me this? Because I figured out who you really are about 20 minutes after you walked into my equipment room. Cole met her eyes. Commander Blackwell, SEAL Team 7, one of the first women through the pipeline. Specialty in electronic warfare and asymmetric tactics. Call sign Echo. Eliza's face gave away nothing. That's classified information, Chief. I still have friends in the community. They told me Blackwell's daughter made it through BUD/S. Set records. He smiled slightly. Told me she had her father's eyes and her father's discipline and that she scared the hell out of her instructors. And now you're here, assessing readiness, asking questions about Vandermeer's command decisions. Cole's smile faded. You're not here to evaluate equipment. You're here to evaluate him. Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Then, 3 separate complaints have been filed about Major Vandermeer's leadership, ignored safety protocols, dismissed subordinate input, created a toxic command climate. JSOC wants an independent assessment. They sent you. They sent me. She looked back out at the desert. My father died because a commander prioritized ego over competence. I won't let that happen again if I can prevent it. Cole nodded slowly. Then he held out the compass. Your father wanted you to have this. He told me to give it to you when the time was right. Eliza stared at the compass. He told you that in 91? No, he told me that 6 months before he died. Came to see me. We had coffee. He said, Cole's voice broke slightly. He said if anything happened to him, I should find you. Give you this. Tell you that the old ways survive because people like us refuse to let them die. Eliza took the compass. Her fingers closed around the warm brass. She didn't cry. Blackwell's didn't cry. But her hands shook, just slightly. Thank you, Chief. Garrison, please. We're past formalities. Garrison. She looked at him directly. Whatever I'm really here for. I'm with you. His voice was absolute. Your father saved my life. Taught me everything that matters. I've been waiting 33 years to repay that debt. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do, because he asked me to watch over you. And I intend to keep that promise. He smiled. Besides, Vandermeer needs someone to knock him down a few pegs. Might as well be us. Eliza allowed herself a small smile, the first real emotion she'd shown since arriving. He's going to be a problem. Let him be a problem. We've dealt with worse. They stood together in the darkness, 2 generations connected by a debt paid in blood and shrapnel 33 years ago. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Below them, the desert waited. Somewhere in that darkness, an enemy was watching, planning, preparing to strike at the American base with a weapon that would render all of Vandermeer's technology useless. But they didn't know that yet. For now, there was just the night and the stars and 2 warriors standing watch. The storm was coming, but they would be ready. They had to be, because discipline was the only weapon no one could take from them. The intelligence briefing began at 700 hours. The Tactical Operations Center was a cave of screens and servers cooled to 65 degrees, while the desert outside climbed toward triple digits. 18 people sat around a conference table that could have seated 30. Major Vandermeer stood at the head, a laser pointer in his hand like a conductor's baton. Sector 3 remains quiet. He clicked through satellite imagery. Thermal shows normal patterns. No massing of forces, no unusual vehicle movement. Click. Drone coverage confirms. AI analysis gives us a 92% probability of continued low-threat status. The junior officers nodded and took notes. They were young, fresh from schools that taught them to trust algorithms and data streams. They'd grown up with smartphones and GPS. The idea of operating without technology was as foreign to them as cave painting. Eliza sat in the back row. She'd been invited as a courtesy. CENTCOM assessment team, observer status. She watched the screens with the intensity of someone reading a language nobody else could see. Cole stood against the wall near the coffee station. Civilian contractor. Technically not part of the briefing, but tolerated because he'd been around longer than most of the officers. He watched Eliza watching the screens. Signal intelligence shows minor EM fluctuations in the northwest sector. The intelligence officer was a captain named Morrison, 28 years old, MIT graduate. Brilliant with computers. Could be atmospheric, could be thermal interference from ground equipment. Assessment, Vandermeer's tone suggested he'd already made up his mind. 90% probability it's environmental noise. And the other 10%, Morrison hesitated, could be electronic probing, testing our detection thresholds. Could be. Vandermeer dismissed it with a wave. But probably isn't. We've had atmospheric anomalies all week. I'm not going to alarm the base over static. Eliza's hand rose. Not urgent, just there, waiting to be acknowledged. Vandermeer saw it, ignored it for 15 seconds. Then, because protocol demanded it, yes, Ms. Blackwell. Permission to see the EM data, Captain Morrison. Morrison glanced at Vandermeer, got a slight nod, pulled up the readings on a side screen. Eliza studied them for 30 seconds. Her eyes moved across the spectral analysis the way a musician reads sheet music. These fluctuations, they're not random. They're not consistent either. Morrison was defensive, his analysis, his conclusions. No repeating pattern, no signal characteristics. Not regular patterns, but not random. Eliza pointed without standing. There and there, 17-second intervals, then 23 seconds, then 17 again. The variance looks random, but it's actually a Fibonacci sequence, 17, 23, 40, 63. The room went quiet. Morrison pulled up historical data, scrolled back. His face went pale. She's right, the intervals follow Fibonacci. How did you? It's an old tradecraft technique, Soviet era. Make probing signals look like natural variation by encoding them in mathematical sequences. Eliza's voice remained calm, factual. Someone is testing your detection capabilities, finding the gaps in your coverage. Vandermeer's jaw tightened. Or it's coincidence. You're seeing patterns in noise. Major with respect, this is too precise to be coincidence. Your opinion is noted. Vandermeer turned back to his presentation. We maintain current alert status. No changes. Morrison, flag any further anomalies, but don't waste resources chasing ghosts. He looked directly at Eliza. We deal in probabilities here, Ms. Blackwell, not paranoia. The briefing continued. Logistics, personnel, maintenance schedules. The comfortable routine of a base that believed it was safe. Eliza didn't speak again. She just sat there with her notepad writing observations that would end up in a report nobody would read until it was too late. After the briefing, Cole caught up with her in the corridor. You were right about the signals. I know. Vandermeer's going to ignore it. I know that too. She kept walking, purposeful strides, which is why we're going to prepare anyway. Prepare for what? For when the lights go out. They went to the equipment room. Cole's domain, the forgotten corner where analog technology went to die. Eliza set her case on the workbench and opened it. Inside was not the assessment equipment she'd shown before. Inside was a field operator's loadout, signal detection gear, portable power supplies, and tools that most people hadn't seen since the Cold War ended. You've been planning this. Cole's voice held admiration. I've been planning for every contingency. It's what my father taught me. She pulled out a handheld spectrum analyzer. Military grade, probably classified. If someone hits this base with an EMP or a sophisticated jamming attack, every modern system will go down. Computers, radios, GPS, everything that Vandermeer thinks makes him invincible. And when that happens, we fall back on what works, what's always worked. She gestured at the racks of equipment. Copper wire, analog signals, manual calculations, the fundamentals. Cole smiled. The expression made him look 20 years younger. Your father would be proud. My father would say I should have moved faster. She began testing connections on the old field telephone system. These copper lines, they still run throughout the base. Most of them, installed in 2003. Command wanted them removed in 2015, but the work order got lost. Cole's smile widened. I may have accidentally lost it, multiple times. Good, we're going to need them. They worked through the morning, testing circuits, tracing lines, identifying which systems were truly isolated from the modern network and which had been integrated. Every analog system that touched a computer was a potential vulnerability. They needed pure mechanical connections. copper and electrons, physics that couldn't be hacked or jammed or fried by electromagnetic pulse. At 1100 hours, Corpsman Micah Fletcher appeared in the doorway. He was young, 22, from some small town in Appalachia whose name Cole could never remember. This was his first deployment, his first time outside the United States. Master Chief Commander Blackwell, he still didn't know Eliza's real rank. I was told to report here for equipment training. Eliza looked up from her work. Who told you that? You did, ma'am, yesterday. You said you needed a medical specialist familiar with field procedures. Right. She'd interviewed him 2 days ago, asked him about his training, his knowledge of trauma medicine, his ability to work under pressure. He'd been nervous, but competent, green, but teachable. You know how to perform a needle decompression. Yes, ma'am, practiced in training. Practiced isn't the same as done. No, ma'am. When the power goes out, when the digital monitors fail, when you can't call for help, can you save a man's life using nothing but your hands and your training? Fletcher swallowed. I hope so, ma'am. Hope isn't enough, but we're going to make sure you're ready anyway. She gestured him over. Chief Cole is going to show you how the field telephone system works. If communications go down, you'll need to know how to manually connect your aid station to the TOC. Ma'am, is something going to happen? Eliza met his eyes. Something is always going to happen, Corpsman. The question is whether you're ready when it does. They trained him for 2 hours. How to hand crank the field telephone. How to patch through the copper wire network. How to use the phonetic alphabet when digital encryption wasn't available. Old skills. Obsolete skills. Skills that might save his life. Fletcher was a quick study. His hands remembered the manual work from a childhood before smartphones. By the end of the session, he could connect the aid station to 3 different points in the base using nothing but copper wire and determination. Why are we doing this? He asked the question carefully, not challenging, genuinely confused. We have digital comms, encrypted radio. Why learn the old way? Cole answered before Eliza could. Because the old way works when the new way fails. And if you don't know the old way, you die when the technology dies. Is that what happened to Commander Blackwell's father? The room went silent. Fletcher's face went pale as he realized what he'd said. Eliza's expression didn't change. My father died because the commander he served under believed technology was infallible. When it failed, that commander had no backup plan. No contingency, no discipline. She turned back to her work. I won't let that happen to the men on this base, even if their commander is too arrogant to prepare. Fletcher nodded slowly. I understand, ma'am. Good. Now get back to your aid station. Practice those connections until you can do them in the dark. Because when it happens, it'll probably be dark. After Fletcher left, Cole studied Eliza with concern. You really think it's coming soon? I think whoever's probing our defenses is almost done gathering data, and once they have what they need, they'll strike. She closed her equipment case. Could be tonight, could be next week, but it's coming. And Vandermeer. Vandermeer will panic. He spent his entire career trusting technology. When it betrays him, he won't know what to do. She picked up her case. But we will. The day burned away under a merciless sun. Evening came with the promise of slightly less heat. Marines rotated through their shifts. Coffee was consumed in quantities that would have alarmed a cardiologist. The base settled into its nightly rhythm, the comfortable routine of a deployment winding down. At 21:30 hours, Eliza was in her quarters. A small room, concrete walls, a cot, a desk. Spartan by design, she sat at the desk with a photograph. Her father in dress uniform, the Navy Cross on his chest. Eyes that looked through the camera into something beyond. I'm trying, Dad, she whispered to the photograph. I'm trying to do what you would have done. The photograph didn't answer. It never did. But she could hear his voice anyway. Memory or imagination, it didn't matter. The lessons remained. Ego is gravity. It pulls men into making stupid decisions. When you're in charge, check your ego at the door. Think about the mission. Think about your people. Everything else is just noise. She set the photo down. Checked her watch. 21:47 hours. 13 minutes until midnight. She didn't know why that felt significant. Just a sense, the kind of intuition that operators developed after enough time in hostile territory. The feeling that the calm was about to break. At 22:47 hours, the feeling proved correct. It started as a whisper, a hiss, a sound like radio static but wrong, too loud, too invasive. Every speaker in the base crackled to life simultaneously. Every radio, every intercom, all of them channeling the same horrible electronic scream. In the TOC screens flickered. Satellite feeds dissolved into digital snow. The massive displays that showed real-time drone coverage went black. The servers that processed terabytes of intelligence every second began to emit high-pitched squeals as their cooling fans failed. The lights dimmed, flickered, stabilized at half brightness as the generators struggled against an invisible load. Major Vandermeer stood in the center of the TOC, frozen. Around him, young officers stared at dead screens with the expression of people watching their world end. "What's happening?" His voice was too loud in the sudden chaos. "Someone give me a sitrep." Captain Morrison worked frantically at a console that was refusing to respond. "Sir, it's everything. All comms are down, hardline and wireless. GPS is gone. The network is completely compromised." Compromised? What does that mean? "It means we're getting hit with some kind of signal attack." Morrison's hands were shaking. "It's not just jamming, it's actively rewriting firmware, changing code at the BIOS level. It's like a virus but transmitted through the air." "That's impossible." "It's happening, sir." Vandermeer felt the ground shifting under his feet. His entire command philosophy was built on technological superiority. Satellite oversight, drone coverage, real-time intelligence, and it had all vanished in less than 30 seconds. "Execute standard countermeasures. Switch to secondary channels. Reboot the servers." Morrison looked at him with something approaching pity. "Sir, that'll make it worse. The signal is using our reboot attempts to spread. Every time we try to restart a system, it infects 3 more. "Then what do I do?" Nobody answered, because nobody knew. That's when the mortar started falling. The first explosion came from the south perimeter, a thunderclap of high explosive that shook dust from the ceiling of the TOC, then the west perimeter, then the fuel depot, each impact precise, calculated, walking onto targets that should have been impossible to hit without advanced intelligence. "All units," Vandermeer grabbed a radio handset. Static howled back at him. "All units, this is actual. Return fire, suppress enemy positions." A sergeant near him dared to speak. "Sir, we don't have target coordinates. We're firing blind." "I gave you an order, Sergeant." "Sir, execute the order." The base erupted in defensive fire. Marines on the perimeter walls shooting into the darkness, wasting ammunition, revealing their positions with muzzle flashes. Every round fired was a guess. Hope substituting for knowledge. Panic substituting for discipline. In the aid station, Corpsman Fletcher heard the explosions and felt his training evaporate into fear. He'd practiced for this, run drills. But drills didn't have the smell of burning fuel, didn't have the sound of men screaming, didn't have the visceral terror of knowing you might die in the next 60 seconds. His radio was dead. The digital medical monitors were flickering and dying. He was 22 years old and completely alone. Then a sound cut through the chaos. A sound from another era. The mechanical ring of a field telephone. Fletcher stared at it. The old handset mounted on the wall. The one Commander Blackwell had made him practice with. He picked it up. "Aid station." "Fletcher." Eliza's voice was calm, utterly calm, as if the base wasn't being destroyed around them. "Listen carefully. In approximately 3 minutes, you're going to receive casualties. Sergeant Willis is going to come through that door with a sucking chest wound. His lung will be collapsed. Do you understand?" "How do you know? Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Get your trauma kit ready. 14-gauge needle, chest seal. I'll walk you through it when he arrives." The line went dead. Fletcher stood there with the handset in his shaking hand. Then he moved, got his kit, laid out the equipment, forced his breathing to slow. Training. He had training. He could do this. 3 minutes later, Sergeant Willis came through the door. 2 Marines carrying him, blood spreading across his chest, breathing in short, desperate gasps, exactly as Eliza had predicted. The field telephone rang. In the TOC, Eliza appeared like a ghost materializing from smoke. She didn't come through the main entrance. She came from a maintenance corridor that nobody remembered existed. She moved with the fluid efficiency of someone who'd mapped every meter of the base in her head. Cole was with her, carrying a case. They went straight to the deprecated analog panel in the corner, the one everyone had forgotten about. Vandermeer saw them. "What are you doing? I told you to stay out of tactical spaces." Eliza didn't look at him. Her hands were already opening the panel. "Connecting probes." "You're in my way, Major." The tone of her voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a statement of absolute fact delivered with the authority of someone who'd been born to command. For the first time in his career, Major Bryce Vandermeer was speechless. The polymorphic signal is riding on your power grid. Eliza spoke to Morrison, not Vandermeer. It's using your own generators as a broadcast antenna. The enemy isn't just jamming you, they've hijacked your infrastructure. Morrison stared at her. That's brilliant. Horrifying, but brilliant. They created a feedback loop. Every reboot attempt strengthens their signal. She pulled a small handheld device from her case, custom built, circuit boards visible through a clear plastic housing. I'm going to create a counter-resonant frequency. Won't break their signal, but it'll create a narrow, clean channel within the noise. How? Morrison leaned closer, desperate for hope. The physics, harmonic cancellation, the signal has a carrier wave at 2.4 gigahertz. If I generate a tone at exactly 2.4000001 gigahertz offset by 1 millionth, they'll interfere with each other. Create a null space, a clean channel about 2 kilohertz wide. She was speaking a language nobody else understood, but her hands were moving with absolute confidence, connecting her device to the analog panel, adjusting frequencies by touch, the kind of expertise that couldn't be faked. Cole turned to Morrison. I need a runner, someone fast. For what? Find me a PRC-77 radio. The old green one in the motor pool, not the new systems, and every field telephone you can find, the hand-crank models. Those are antiques. They're also the only things that'll work. Move. Morrison grabbed a young private. You heard him. Go. Vandermeer finally found his voice. Who authorized you to take command of my TOC? Eliza looked up, met his eyes. General Thorne did. About 2 minutes ago, she pulled out her satellite phone, military grade, encrypted. The screen showed an active call. He's on the line now if you want to speak with him. Vandermeer took the phone with numb fingers, put it to his ear. Major Vandermeer. General Thorne's voice was cold steel wrapped in frost. You will transfer tactical command to Commander Blackwell immediately. She has full authority to execute defensive operations. Do you acknowledge by my... Sir, this is highly irregular. I don't recall asking for your opinion, Major. Acknowledge the order. I acknowledge, sir. Good. Now get out of her way. Vandermeer handed the phone back to Eliza. Every eye in the TOC was on him, watching his authority crumble, watching a civilian contractor take control of combat operations. The humiliation was total, complete. He stepped back, said nothing. There was nothing to say. Eliza returned to her work as if the entire exchange had been a minor interruption. Chief, I need you to talk me through the copper wire routing. We're going to build a new nervous system using the old infrastructure. Already on it. Cole was tracing lines on a schematic pulled from 2003. Main trunk runs from here to the aid station, secondary line to the perimeter command post, tertiary to the motor pool and ammunition depot. Perfect. We connect those nodes, we have a command network. Another explosion rocked the base. Closer this time, the western ammunition bunker, smoke and fire billowing into the night sky. The mortars were walking in, getting more accurate. Whoever was coordinating the attack had real-time intelligence. They were adapting as the defense adapted. The runner returned with the PRC-77 and a half-dozen field telephones. Eliza took the radio, opened it. The thing was older than most of the people in the room. Vacuum tubes, analog frequency dials. The kind of radio that had been carried through Vietnam and Desert Storm, and a dozen conflicts that no longer had names. She didn't try to broadcast. She attached a custom antenna, began turning the frequency dial slowly. Listening. Her eyes closed. Total concentration. What's she doing? Morrison whispered to Cole. Listening to the shape of the noise, finding the pattern in the chaos. That's impossible. There's too much interference. Not for her. Eliza's eyes snapped open. The enemy mortars are firing on a timed sequence, coordinated by low-power data bursts between rounds. The polymorphic signal has to drop for microseconds to let their commands through. I can hear the gap. You can hear microsecond gaps in electromagnetic noise. Morrison's voice was approaching awe. That's not possible. It's very difficult, but not impossible, if you know what you're listening for. She continued adjusting the dial. Their command unit is mobile, but it has to stop to broadcast firing coordinates. The broadcast is omnidirectional, and the source has a unique acoustic signature. She held up her hand for silence. The TOC went quiet. She tilted her head, listening not just to the radio but to the air itself, to the vibrations traveling through the concrete floor. She was using the entire base as a sensor array. There, she whispered. She opened her eyes. They were sharp, focused, lethal. She grabbed a grease pencil and a map of the terrain surrounding the base. The mortar teams are here and here. She drew two circles, triangulating from the time delay between impact and launch sound. Basic physics, high school trigonometry. Their command unit is here, a single precise X on the map, 2.3 kilometers northwest, behind that ridge formation. How can you possibly know that? Vandermeer's voice, still doubting, still unable to accept what was happening. The generator has a worn bearing. I can hear it between the mortar launches. Rhythmic flaw in the sound floor. Frequency of 47.3 hertz with harmonic distortion at 94.6. Cole studied the map. That's behind solid cover. We can't get a direct line of sight. Don't need line of sight. Eliza was already moving to the communication station. Picked up a field telephone handset, cranked it. Mortar pit, this is Echo. A voice crackled back through pure copper wire. Analog signal that couldn't be jammed or hacked. This is Mortar pit. Go ahead. I'm sending you coordinates for fire mission. You'll fire one round, not high explosive. Ma'am, illumination round, white phosphorus. An illumination round won't kill anything, Commander. It's not supposed to kill. It's supposed to fry by. She read off the coordinates, precise to 8 decimal places. The target is broadcasting on an active transmitter. An illumination round's phosphorus charge creates a secondary electromagnetic pulse on detonation. It'll overload their antenna and burn out their systems from the inside. There was a pause on the line. Then I've never heard of that. Because it requires the enemy to be transmitting at the exact moment of detonation. The timing window is 1.3 seconds. I'll give you the mark. Cole was staring at her with something beyond admiration, something approaching reverence. How do you know this will work? Physics. The phosphorus generates a thermal spike of 3,000 degrees, creates ionization in the air. The transmitter becomes a receiver. Basic electromagnetic theory. I tested it in simulation at Fort Bragg last year. Simulation isn't combat. No, but the physics doesn't change. She went back to the radio, listening to the enemy transmission patterns, counting the intervals, calculating launch time and flight time, and the precise moment when shell and signal would intersect. Through the field telephone, Mortar pit standby for Mark. Fletcher's voice crackled on another line. Ma'am, Sergeant Willis is crashing. Blood pressure dropping. I don't know if, Micah, Eliza's voice dropped into that hypnotic calm. You're going to save his life. Trust your training. Trust your hands. I'm right here with you. She was coordinating 3 operations simultaneously. Guiding Fletcher through the needle decompression, tracking enemy transmissions, calculating firing solutions. Her mind was a supercomputer running on discipline and training, on fundamentals that didn't require electricity or satellites or anything except knowledge and will. Second intercostal space, Micah, mid-clavicular line. You'll feel resistance, then a pop, then a rush of air. That's the pneumothorax releasing. I'm scared, ma'am. Fear is information. Use it. Let it make you careful. But don't let it make you hesitate. Willis needs you right now. And silence on the line. Then, I'm in. Oh God, it worked. He's breathing. His pressure is coming up. Good. Stabilize him. Keep that line open. Another explosion. Closer. The perimeter wall this went to. Marines were dying out there in the dark, fighting an enemy they couldn't see. And Vandermeer stood paralyzed watching a woman he'd dismissed as a civilian take control of his command with a certainty he'd never possessed. Eliza's hand went up. She was listening to the enemy broadcast, counting seconds. Her internal chronometer was measuring intervals that normal humans couldn't perceive. 3, 2, 1, mark. The field telephone to the mortar pit, fire. A soft thump from somewhere in the base. The sound of a single mortar launching. 14.7 seconds of flight time. The shell arcing through darkness on a ballistic path that had been calculated by hand and mind rather than computer and GPS. The TOC was absolutely silent, every person holding their breath, watching Eliza's face. She stood motionless, eyes closed, listening to the radio, to the enemy transmission that would either continue or die. 14 seconds. A white flash lit the horizon, the illumination round detonating 2 kilometers away, burning at 3,000 degrees, ionizing the air, creating an electromagnetic shockwave that was invisible but devastating. For 2 heartbeats, the static on every radio continued. Then it cut dead. Not fading, not diminishing, cut as if by a knife. The lights in the TOC flickered and returned to full brightness. The servers beeped as they re-established satellite connections. Screens came back online one by one. A drone feed appeared on the main display. It showed a pillar of black smoke rising from the exact coordinates Eliza had marked. The enemy mortar fire stopped. Just stopped. The attack was broken. In the sudden ringing silence, the only sound was the quiet hum of restored technology. Eliza opened her eyes, set down the radio, began packing her equipment with the same deliberate calm with which she'd unpacked it. The room full of officers and enlisted personnel stared at her. Their faces showed disbelief, awe, the kind of fear that comes from witnessing something that doesn't fit into your understanding of reality. They hadn't just seen a problem being solved, they'd seen mastery. Brutal, beautiful, absolute. Cole was the first to move. He walked over to Eliza. His face showed the emotion he'd been holding back for 33 years. Pride, grief, joy, debt finally repaid. Your father, he said quietly, would be very proud. Eliza looked at him. For just a moment, her armor cracked. Her eyes glistened. He's watching. Through you. She pulled something from her pocket. The compass. Nathaniel Blackwell's compass. She pressed it into Cole's hand. Keep it. Train the next generation. That's how we honor him. Cole closed his fingers around the brass, nodded, couldn't speak. Vandermeer stood at the edge of the TOC, his command restored by technology, but his authority destroyed by competence. He wanted to say something, to reassert control, to somehow salvage his dignity, but there was nothing to say. He'd been exposed, revealed as a man who'd built his career on systems he didn't understand, on the assumption that technology would always save him, and when it had failed, he'd been useless. Eliza walked past him without a glance. Cole followed. They left the TOC in silence. Behind them, Captain Morrison turned to the other officers. His voice was quiet but carried weight. That, he said, was what real leadership looks like. Nobody argued. Outside, the base was recovering. Fires being controlled, casualties being treated. Marines checking their sectors with the careful paranoia of people who just survived the impossible. Eliza and Cole stood on the northern perimeter wall, the same place they'd talked the night before. The desert stretched out before them, dark and ancient and indifferent. It's not over, Eliza said quietly. This was a probe, a test. Whoever designed that attack wanted to see how we'd respond. They learned that we can adapt. They learned that one person can adapt. When I leave this base goes back to Vandermeer's command, and next time I won't be here. So what do? We prepare them, train them, make sure they know the fundamentals, the old ways. She looked at him. You're staying, aren't you? 6 more months, training contract. I'll make sure these kids learn what your father taught me. Thank you. Don't thank me. This is payment on a debt that can never be fully repaid. They stood in silence, 2 warriors across 2 generations, connected by sacrifice and discipline, and a compass that had passed from hand to hand through decades of war. Below them, Corman Fletcher was saving Sergeant Willis's life with hands that were steady now. With training that had been tested and proven, he would apply to the SEAL pipeline in 3 months, would carry forward the lessons learned in one desperate night. In the TOC, Captain Morrison was writing a report that would never see official filing, a report about what he'd witnessed, about the difference between knowing and understanding, about why the old ways mattered even in a digital age. And in his office, Major Bryce Vandermeer sat alone in the dark, staring at screens that had betrayed him, wondering how his carefully constructed career had collapsed in less than 3 hours. He would be relieved of command tomorrow, reassigned to teach basic navigation to lieutenants who still believed GPS would never fail. It was a humiliation designed to teach humility. Whether he would learn was another question. The night wore on, the stars wheeled overhead, and somewhere in the desert the enemy was analyzing what had happened, planning the next move, building something bigger. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight the base had survived because one woman refused to let technology replace thinking, because one old warrior kept equipment that others called obsolete, because fundamentals never go out of style. Discipline had defeated ego. Training had defeated technology. And the silent warrior had proven that the quietest voice in the room is often the most dangerous. The debriefing began 12 hours after the last mortar round fell silent. The air had been cleared of smoke, but not of tension. Dawn had come and gone, replaced by the merciless clarity of midday sun. In a conference room that smelled of burnt coffee and exhausted men, the reckoning was about to begin. General Marcus Thorne sat at the head of a long table scarred by years of hard use. He was 65 years old. His face was a topographical map of wars fought in places that didn't appear on civilian news. Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, Desert Storm. He'd earned his stars through competence, not connections. He valued results over rhetoric, and he had no patience for officers who confused authority with ability. Major Bryce Vandermeer sat to his right. His uniform was immaculate, every ribbon perfectly aligned. His posture was rigid with the desperate dignity of a man fighting his last battle, the battle for his own narrative. Commander Eliza Blackwell sat opposite him next to Master Chief Cole. She wore the same plain gray fatigues she'd worn since arriving. No rank insignia visible. But everyone in the room now knew exactly who she was, what she was. The woman who'd saved the base when its commander had frozen. 3 other officers rounded out the table. A colonel from CENTCOM, a Navy captain who served as Thorne's chief of staff, and Captain Morrison present as the intelligence officer who'd witnessed everything. The general's aide placed a digital recorder on the table. Pressed record. Debriefing for action at Forward Operating Base Redstone, date classified. General Thorne presiding. Thorne's eyes swept the table, settled on Vandermeer. Major, your report. Vandermeer cleared his throat. He'd spent the last 12 hours preparing this statement, rehearsing it, crafting the narrative that would save his career. He spoke with the practiced cadence of someone who'd given many briefings to people who weren't paying close attention. Sir, at approximately 2,247 hours, FOB Redstone came under coordinated attack utilizing sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities we had not previously encountered in theater. The enemy employed what appeared to be a polymorphic signal designed to infiltrate and compromise our digital infrastructure. He paused, letting that sink in. Unforeseen capabilities. Not his fault, just bad luck. The attack was accompanied by precision mortar fire targeting key facilities. Initial casualties were unavoidable given the unexpected nature of the assault. However, through decisive leadership and adaptive command protocols, we were able to restore operational capability and repel the attack. Another pause. Thorne's face remained expressionless. The civilian analyst, Ms. Blackwell, despite her unorthodox methods and initial insubordination, managed to provide technical assistance that proved fortunate in our restoration efforts. Her contribution, while irregular, was ultimately supportive of the command climate I had fostered. A climate that encourages creative thinking and values diverse perspectives. He was trying to absorb her victory into his own story, trying to frame her competence as a product of his leadership. It was desperate, transparent, and exactly the kind of thing Thorne had seen 1,000 times from officers who valued their careers over their conscience. In summary, sir, while the attack presented unforeseen challenges, the base's defensive posture remained sound throughout. We maintained order. We adapted to the threat, and we achieved mission success with minimal casualties considering the sophistication of the enemy action. Vandermeer sat back. He'd said his piece, constructed his defense. Now he waited for validation that would never come. Thorne let the silence stretch, let it become uncomfortable. Then he turned his head slowly toward Eliza. Commander Blackwell, your report. Eliza didn't speak immediately. She reached into her case and withdrew a tablet. Slid it across the table to the general. Her movements were economical, precise, not a wasted motion. My report is data, sir. Thorne picked up the tablet. The screen displayed a synchronized timeline, not narrative, not opinion, just facts arranged in chronological order with supporting evidence attached to each entry. 2,247:15. Polymorphic signal attack detected. Base-wide systems failure initiated. 2,247:42. Major Vandermeer issues order to reboot all systems. Audio file attached. Analysis: this order accelerated system compromise by 340%. 2,248:13. First mortar impacts south perimeter. Casualties: 2 killed in action, 5 wounded in action. 2,24907. Major Vandermeer orders blind suppressive fire. Audio file attached. Result: ammunition expenditure 4,200 rounds with 0 enemy casualties. Revealed friendly positions through muzzle flash. 2,251:34. Sergeant Willis catastrophic chest wound. Biometric data attached showing oxygen saturation dropping toward fatal levels. 2,252:18. Commander Blackwell assumes tactical command per General Thorne authorization. Audio recording attached. 225341. Analog communication network established using deprecated copper infrastructure. 225509. Corman Fletcher performs needle chest decompression under remote guidance. Willis vital signs stabilize. Medical sensor data attached. 225822. Enemy command vehicle location triangulated via acoustic analysis. Coordinates 36.2847 degrees north, 43.1293 degrees east. Acoustic signature files attached showing generator bearing failure at 47.3 Hz. 230145. Single illumination round fired. Flight time 14.7 seconds. 230200. Enemy signal terminated. Satellite imagery confirms direct hit on enemy command vehicle. Before and after images attached with thermal analysis. The timeline continued. Every decision, every action, every outcome, documented with sensor data audio recordings in satellite imagery. It was a prosecution brief disguised as a mission report. Each data point was a bullet. Each timestamp was a nail in a coffin. Thorne scrolled through the attachments. His face remained neutral, but his eyes were cold. He spent particular time on the audio file of Vandermeer ordering the system reboots, then on the biometric data showing Willis nearly dying, then on the satellite confirmation of Eliza's kill shot. He paused on one attachment. His expression shifted slightly. He looked up at Eliza with something approaching concern. "Commander, there's something else you should know." He turned the tablet to show her. "The polymorphic signals source code. We've analyzed it. The architecture is American." The room went cold, meaning Eliza's voice was steady, but her hands tightened on the table edge. "Meaning whoever built this weapon learned it from us. The encryption protocols, the frequency hopping algorithms, the firmware rewrite methodology." Thorne's jaw was tight. "This is American doctrine turned against us, not stolen, taught." Cole leaned forward. "Sir, are you saying—" "I'm saying we have a training problem. Or worse, a loyalty problem." Thorne's eyes swept the room. Someone who understood our systems intimately decided to weaponize that knowledge. And they're still out there, teaching others. The weight of that settled over the table like a shroud. The enemy wasn't just foreign insurgents with stolen technology. The enemy was someone who'd once been one of them. Thorne looked directly at Eliza. "Your new mission just got more complicated. You're not just hunting technology, you're hunting a traitor." Morrison's face had gone pale. "Sir, how far back does this go? How many people could have this knowledge?" "Hundreds, maybe thousands." Thorne set the tablet down. "Former contractors, allied military personnel, anyone who's worked with us in the last decade and decided to sell what they learned. But the sophistication suggests someone with direct operational experience. Someone who's been inside our war rooms." Vandermeer found his voice. "That's impossible. Our vetting procedures—" "Your vetting procedures screened for current threats, Major. Not for people who'd turn years after their service ended." Thorne's voice was ice. "This is a long game attack. Someone spent years learning our systems, then years building counters to them. This didn't happen overnight." Eliza's mind was racing through possibilities. The polymorphic signal's elegance suggested deep technical expertise, but the tactical application showed operational experience. Whoever designed this attack understood both the technology and how Americans would respond to its failure. That was a rare combination. "Sir," her voice cut through the rising tension. "Permission to review personnel files. Anyone with both signals, intelligence background, and operational deployment history in the last 15 years. "Granted, Morrison will assist you." Thorne turned back to Vandermeer. "But first we finish this debriefing." He stood. In military culture, when the senior officer stands during a debriefing, the verdict has been rendered. There is no appeal. "Major Bryce Vandermeer, your failure last night was not in being overwhelmed by a novel enemy tactic. That can happen to any commander. Systems fail, intelligence is incomplete. The fog of war is real." He paused. "Let that false hope linger for just a moment. Your failure was in your inability to recognize the solution when it was standing right in front of you. Your failure was in valuing your own authority over the survival of your men. You saw a woman in civilian clothes and you dismissed her. You should have seen a lifeline." Vandermeer opened his mouth, closed it. "Your command decisions directly resulted in 4 deaths that could have been prevented, 11 wounded who required evacuation, and the near total compromise of base security." Thorne's voice was a scalpel, precise, merciless. "But your greatest failure was moral. You attempted to claim credit for work you not only didn't do, but actively obstructed." The general's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "I knew your father, Major. Naval Academy class of '68, good officer, died in a helicopter crash off the Roosevelt in '94. He would be ashamed of what you've become. Vandermeer flinched as if struck. You had every advantage. Education, family legacy, early promotion, and you squandered it by believing that rank conferred wisdom, that technology replaced thinking, that your position made you infallible. Thorne shook his head. You're relieved of command effective immediately. Reassigned to Marine Corps Base Quantico as an instructor at the basic school. You will teach land navigation to second lieutenants until you remember that maps matter more than monitors, that compasses work when GPS fails, that leadership is earned, not inherited. It was the ultimate humiliation. Not discharge, not court-martial. Worse, reduction to teaching the absolute basics to the most junior officers. A public acknowledgement that he'd forgotten fundamentals, that he needed to start over from the beginning. Vandermeer's voice came out strangled. Sir, 20 years of service. My record. Your record ends here. Thorne's voice was final. What comes next depends on whether you learn from this. Some officers do. Most don't. I hope you're one of the rare ones. Vandermeer stood. His movements were mechanical. A man operating on autopilot while his world collapsed. He saluted. Thorne returned it with the bare minimum courtesy required. Then Vandermeer walked to the door. He paused, looked back at Eliza. For just a moment, something passed across his face, not quite recognition, not quite regret, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. That 33 years ago, a better man had saved his life, and that man's daughter had just saved it again, despite everything. Commander, his voice was rough. Your father, he was right about me, even back then. He saw what I'd become. Then he was gone. The door closed. The room exhaled collectively. Thorne turned to Eliza. His expression transformed. The prosecutorial cold vanished, replaced by something warmer. Respect. He drew himself to full attention, rendered a slow, formal salute. It was a gesture rarely seen. A three-star general saluting a junior officer. A public acknowledgement from the highest level of the institution. Not of rank, of merit. Of demonstrated excellence so profound it transcended hierarchy. Eliza stood, returned the salute with a crisp nod. The exchange lasted 3 seconds, but everyone in the room understood its significance. Commander, your father would have been proud of what you accomplished last night, and I'm proud to have you in my command. Thorne gestured to the chairs. Sit, we have a lot to discuss. Over the next hour, they dissected the attack in detail. Morrison pulled up signals intelligence from the 4 other bases that had experienced similar probing. The patterns were consistent. Fibonacci sequences in the timing, American encryption protocols in the architecture. And always the attacks came at night, when skeleton crews were on duty, when decision-makers were tired. Whoever's doing this understands our rhythms, Morrison said. They know when we're weakest, when our guard is down. They also know our equipment, Cole added. The polymorphic signal specifically targeted vulnerabilities in our current generation of servers. Not the old ones, not the new ones, just the systems we're using right now. That's current operational intelligence. Eliza studied the map of affected bases. They formed a rough arc across the Middle East. But the spacing was irregular. Not geographic. Something else was determining target selection. What do these bases have in common, she asked. Besides American operation, Morrison pulled up comparative data. All established between 2019 and 2022. All upgraded to Generation 7 network architecture in 2023. All using the same contractor for digital security implementation. Which contractor? Redstone Solutions. Private military corporation. They handle IT security for about 40% of forward operating bases in theater. Eliza felt something click in her mind. Pull up Redstone Solutions employee roster. Current and former. Cross-reference with anyone who has operational deployment history. Morrison's fingers flew across the keyboard. A list populated. 300 names. Too many. Narrow it to anyone with signals intelligence specialty. 50 names. Now filter for anyone who left the company in the last 18 months. 7 names appeared. Eliza leaned forward, studied the profiles. 6 of them were standard IT contractors. Good technical skills, but no operational background. But the 7th name made her breath catch. Him, she pointed at the screen. The face staring back at her was American, mid-40s, hard eyes. The kind of face that had seen things and decided the world owed him something. His name was Marcus Webb, former Navy. Signals Intelligence Specialist. 12 years in service, multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, worked with SEAL teams, worked with special forces, learned everything there was to know about how American communications worked in hostile territory. Discharged in 2019, not dishonorably. Just decided to get out, took a job with Redstone Solutions, implemented security protocols at 17 forward operating bases, had access to every system, every vulnerability, every weakness. Left the company 8 months ago. Reason cited personal conflict with management. Current whereabouts unknown. That's our traitor, Eliza said quietly. Thorne studied the profile. Webb, I remember this man. Good operator, solid technical skills. Bit of a loner, but that's not unusual in the signals community. He looked at Eliza. What makes you certain it's him? Timeline matches. He had access. He had knowledge. And look at his discharge date, 2019, right before he joined Redstone. She pulled up his service record. He was passed over for promotion twice, filed 3 complaints about assignment inequity. Then suddenly he's out and working as a contractor, making 3 times his military salary. Resentment, Cole said. He felt undervalued, decided to cash in his expertise. More than that, Eliza scrolled through his deployment history. He was at FOB Chapman in 2018, the same base where my father was killed. Same time frame. The room went quiet. Thorne's eyes narrowed. You think there's a connection? I think he saw what happened. Saw a competent officer die because an incompetent commander made bad decisions. And maybe he decided the system was broken. That loyalty didn't pay. That the only thing that mattered was looking out for himself. Morrison pulled up additional data. If it's Webb, he's not working alone. The technology deployment we saw last night requires manufacturing capability. Distribution networks. Training cadres to teach insurgent groups how to use it. That's infrastructure. That's funding. That's organization. So we find the organization. Eliza's voice was steel. We find Webb. And we end this before they can launch whatever they're really planning. Thorne nodded slowly. Commander Blackwell, Master Chief Cole, you're now tasked with hunting Marcus Webb and his network. You'll have full JSOC support, autonomous operational authority. Rules of engagement are simple. Find them, identify them, eliminate the capability. Lethal force is authorized if capture isn't feasible. He pulled out 2 folders, placed them on the table. Your mission packets, intelligence assessments, contact protocols, and backup plans if everything goes sideways. Eliza opened her folder. Inside was everything they'd need. Financial tracking data, known associates, last confirmed sightings, and a map showing suspected locations where Webb might have established a base of operations. You deploy in 48 hours, Thorne continued. Use that time to prepare. Get any equipment you need, brief your team. This won't be easy. Webb knows how we operate. He'll be expecting pursuit. Good, Eliza said. Let him expect it. Expectation creates patterns. Patterns create vulnerabilities. Thorne smiled. It was the expression of a predator recognizing another predator. Your father used to say something similar. He'd be very proud of you, Commander. Thank you, sir. The debriefing concluded. Officers filed out. Soon only Thorne, Eliza, and Cole remained. The general's voice softened slightly. I knew your father well, Commander. Served with him in the 90s. He was one of the best operators I ever met. Not because he was the strongest or the fastest, but because he could think 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. He used to say the same about you, sir. Did he, Thorne's expression was sad. We lost a lot of good men, the ones who had the wisdom to question bad decisions, the ones who valued lives over careers. He met her eyes directly. I won't let the military become a place where people like your father can't survive, where competence is punished and mediocrity is promoted. But it's a constant fight. I understand, sir. I know you do. That's why you're getting this mission. He stood, extended his hand. Make them regret teaching us this lesson. Make them pay for every life they cost us last night. Eliza shook his hand. Yes, sir, we will. After Thorne left, Eliza and Cole sat in the empty conference room. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted like tiny stars. Marcus Webb, Cole said quietly. I remember him. Good technician, but always had a chip on his shoulder. Always felt like the military owed him more than he was getting. Did you serve with him? Briefly, 2017. Training exercise at Fort Bragg. He was competent but bitter. The kind of bitter that comes from thinking you're smarter than everyone around you. Cole shook his head. I should have seen it. Should have said something. You couldn't have known. Maybe, but your father might have. Cole pulled out the compass, set it on the table. He had a sense for people, could read them, see what they'd become before they became it. Eliza traced the engraving with one finger. Did he ever say anything about Webb? Not that I remember, but he didn't talk much about people who disappointed him. He just quietly moved on, found better people to work with. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the mission ahead settling over them like a cloak. We should prepare, Eliza finally said. 48 hours isn't much time. No, but it's enough. Cole stood. I'll coordinate equipment, communications gear, weapons, the analog backup systems we'll need if Webb tries his jamming trick again. I'll work the intelligence angle, financial tracking, known associates, pattern analysis. Eliza picked up her folder. And I'll brief Morrison. He's going to be the institutional memory here after we leave. He needs to know everything. They moved toward the door, stopped. Cole turned back to look at her. Commander, before we go hunting, I need to tell you something about your father's last mission. Eliza went very still. Afghanistan, 2018. I wasn't there, but I talked to him 2 days before. Cole's voice was rough. He called me, said he had a bad feeling about the commander. Said the man was making decisions based on politics, not tactics. Said if anything happened, I should find you. He knew. He suspected. Strongly. Cole met her eyes. He told me to give you the compass when you were ready, to tell you that he was proud, that you'd already surpassed him, that the only thing left was for you to understand something he'd taken 30 years to learn. Eliza's throat was tight. What was that? That you can't save everyone. That sometimes the best you can do is teach the next generation so they don't have to learn the hard way. That legacy isn't measured in missions completed. It's measured in warriors trained. Cole's hand gripped her shoulder. He knew he might die, but he went anyway. Because that's what we do. Because someone has to stand the watch. And now I'm doing the same thing. Yes, hunting something that might kill you, but going anyway, because if you don't, more people die. Cole's voice was fierce. But you're not alone. I'm with you, and your father is with you, and every operator who came before us is with you. We're all echoes, all connected, all part of the same long fight. Eliza felt something crack in the armor she'd maintained for 6 years. I'm scared, she admitted. First time she'd said it out loud, ever. Good. Fear keeps you sharp, makes you careful, makes you check your equipment twice and plan for contingencies. Cole smiled. But fear without action is just paralysis. Fear with discipline is wisdom. Eliza nodded. Then she did something she hadn't done since her father's funeral. She pulled Cole into a brief, fierce embrace. Thank you for everything. For him, for me, for remembering. No thanks needed. This is family. They pulled apart, walked out of the conference room, and the moment passed, but the weight of it remained. Over the next 48 hours, FOB Redstone underwent a quiet transformation. Eliza and Cole worked tirelessly, not just preparing for their mission, but ensuring the base wouldn't fall apart the moment they left. They conducted training sessions. Small groups gathered in the equipment room while Eliza walked them through fundamentals. How to navigate by stars when GPS fails. How to calculate artillery coordinates with paper and pencil. How to communicate using field telephones and Morse code. Cole taught alongside her. His presence was validation. Here was a man who'd been doing this for 40 years, who'd survived multiple wars using these exact techniques. Captain Morrison became their strongest advocate. He organized the sessions, recruited attendees, and most importantly, documented everything. He was building a training program that would persist after they departed. Corpsman Fletcher was transformed, but transformation hadn't been easy. The first night after the attack, Cole found him in the aid station, alone, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, shaking. Cole didn't say anything, just sat down next to him, waited. After a long silence, Fletcher spoke. I almost killed him, Sergeant Willis. I hesitated. For 3 seconds, I couldn't move my hands. But you didn't kill him, you saved him. Only because Commander Blackwell talked me through it. Without her voice, I would have frozen. No, Cole's voice was firm. She guided you, but your hands did the work. Your training did the work. She just gave you permission to trust yourself. Fletcher looked at the older man. His eyes were red. How do you deal with it? The fear that you'll freeze when it matters. You don't deal with it. You accept it. Fear is human. Hesitation is human. Cole's eyes held decades of hard experience. But discipline is how you function despite the fear. That's what makes an operator. Not the absence of fear, the ability to act through it. I want to learn that, really learn it. Then you will, because you already started. That night with Willis was your first real lesson. Everything before that was just practice. Everything after is repetition until your hands remember even when your mind forgets. Fletcher nodded slowly. The weight was still there. But now he understood it was supposed to be there. That carrying it was part of the job. He stood, went back to his equipment, and practiced the needle decompression again, and again, and again, until his hands knew the movements in the dark. 3 days after the attack, he approached Eliza during a training session. "Ma'am, I want to apply to the SEAL pipeline." Eliza studied him, saw the determination that had replaced the fear. Why? Because I want to be like you, like Chief Cole. I want to be someone who doesn't need computers or satellites to save lives, who can operate in the dark with nothing but skill and will. It's not glamorous, Fletcher. It's years of brutal training followed by operations that nobody will ever hear about. Most people wash out. Even more never get a chance to use what they learn. I know, ma'am. And even if you make it through, you might end up dead in some forgotten corner of the world, mourned by people who can never know what you really did. My father worked in a coal mine for 40 years, ma'am. Died of black lung when I was 16. He never complained, never asked for recognition. Just did the work because it needed doing. Fletcher's voice was steady. If I'm going to spend my life underground, might as well be doing something that matters. Eliza reached into her case, pulled out a sealed envelope, handed it to him. I wrote this the day after the attack. Been waiting for you to ask. Fletcher took it with shaking hands. Thank you, ma'am. You already proved yourself. That night in the aid station, you could have frozen, could have let Willis die. But you trusted your training. That's what being an operator means. The ability to function when everything is falling apart. Fletcher nodded, unable to speak. Just nodded and left. Cole watched him go. You're building something here. Something that'll last. My father built it. I'm just continuing his work. No. Cole shook his head. Your father taught individuals. You're teaching a culture. There's a difference. And that difference will save lives long after we're gone. On their last evening at FOB Redstone, Cole hung a new photograph in the equipment room. 2 photographs, actually, mounted side by side in a single frame. The left showed 6 men in desert camouflage. 1991. Iraq. Captain Nathaniel Blackwell in the center, compass in hand. Young Garrison Cole to his right. The moment before everything changed. The right showed the equipment room. 2024. Eliza at the analog panel. Cole beside her with a field telephone. Fletcher in the background. Morrison taking notes. A new generation learning the old ways. Between the photos, Cole mounted a small brass plaque. 2 generations. 1 standard. Discipline endures. The next morning, a helicopter arrived. Eliza and Cole stood on the landing pad with their gear. Marines gathered to watch, not formally, just men and women who wanted to see off the 2 people who'd saved their lives and change their understanding of what it meant to be a warrior. Morrison approached with something in his hands. The bearing. The worn generator bearing that Eliza had identified by sound alone. We thought you should have this, ma'am. Eliza took it. The metal was still scored with failure marks. Thank you, Captain. But this isn't for me. She handed it back. Keep it here. Mount it in the equipment room. Let it remind everyone that weakness is often hidden in plain sound. You just have to listen carefully enough to hear it. Morrison accepted it with a nod. We'll remember, ma'am, what you taught us. We won't let it fade. Fletcher stepped forward. His hands held something wrapped in cloth. The old field manual. Her father's manual. Ma'am, this should go with you. It was my father's. Now it's yours. He'd want it used, not preserved. She placed her hand on his shoulder. Make him proud, Fletcher. Learn everything in that book. Then teach someone else. Yes, ma'am, I will. The helicopter's rotors began to turn. Eliza and Cole climbed aboard. Strapped in, the aircraft lifted off. From the air, FOB Redstone shrank to geometry and sand. But Eliza wasn't watching the base. She was watching the people. The small figures who now understood that systems serve warriors, not the other way around. Before boarding, Cole had pulled her aside one final time, away from everyone else. There's something your father told me, the last time we spoke. He said that if anything happened to him, I should tell you three things, Bapun. Eliza waited. First, that he loved you more than any mission, any operation, any war, that you were his greatest accomplishment and his proudest achievement. Her eyes stung. Second, that you were already better than him, that you had his discipline, but also something he never had. The ability to build instead of just fight, to teach instead of just lead. She couldn't speak. And third, that the old ways survive only if someone has the courage to pass them forward, that he was counting on you to be that someone, to be the bridge between what worked and what works, between the past and the future. Cole pressed the compass into her hand one final time. Keep this now, really keep it, not as a memory, as a tool. Use it when the satellites fail, when the computers die, when everything modern betrays you. Let it remind you that fundamentals never expire. Eliza closed her fingers around the brass. I will. And when you find Webb, when you corner him, remember that he chose this. He had everything your father had, the training, the knowledge, the opportunity. But he chose bitterness over service, ego over discipline, money over honor. That's not the military's failure. That's his. I'll remember. They boarded. The helicopter lifted, and the desert fell away below them. Cole sat across from her in the vibrating cabin. What do you think we'll find when we track Webb down? I think we'll find someone who's convinced himself he's the victim, that the system failed him, that he's justified in everything he's done. Eliza's voice was cold. And I think we'll teach him the oldest lesson in warfare, which is that when you betray your brothers, when you sell out your country, when you choose money over mission, there's no justification that saves you, no excuse that matters, just consequences. The helicopter climbed higher. The mission ahead was dangerous. Webb knew their tactics, had their training, understood their doctrine, but he'd made one critical mistake. He'd assumed that Americans couldn't function without technology, that destroying their systems would destroy their capability, that superior equipment meant superior warriors. He was about to learn how wrong he was, because Eliza Blackwell and Garrison Cole were about to hunt him using the oldest skills in warfare: patience, discipline, and the kind of relentless competence that doesn't need satellites or computers or any technology at all. Just training that doesn't fail. Just fundamentals that endure. Just the old ways that survive because people like them refuse to let them die. The helicopter disappeared into the horizon, heading toward the next battle, carrying with it the lessons of 3 generations. The philosophy of a man who died 6 years ago, but whose discipline had just saved hundreds of lives. Below them, FOB Redstone carried on. In the equipment room, Marines gathered around the photographs, learning, teaching, passing forward. Fletcher opened the field manual, read the first page in a voice that carried his father's strength and his own newfound confidence. Discipline is the only weapon no one can take from you. He looked up at the younger corpsmen watching him, saw their hungry eyes, their desire to be more than they were, and he began to teach. The cycle continued. The mission went on, and somewhere in the darkness ahead, Marcus Webb waited, confident in his technology, certain of his advantage. He didn't know it yet, but his lesson was coming, and it would be taught by a woman who'd learned from the best, who carried her father's compass and her father's discipline, who understood that the quietest voice in the room is often the most dangerous. Because true strength doesn't announce itself, it simply exists, waiting to be revealed when everything else fails and only fundamentals remain. The story continues beyond these words. The hunt begins in earnest, and the silent warrior moves forward into darkness. But that's another chapter, another mission, another time. For now, FOB Redstone stands a little stronger, a little wiser, a little more prepared for the next attack, because someone taught them, because someone remembered, because discipline endures.